Hey gang, figured that we'd do a quick shallow dive on my views of ship balance, and that there was no better way to start this than with an Ares Ion. So let's get this. So for a brief window of time, this ship, the Ares Ion, was the absolute meta ship for any kind of PvP or PvE fighting. Not only did it have this monster gun off to the side of it that could pretty much one-shot anything medium-sized or smaller, pretty much. You would almost always pop a Gladius almost immediately at a range where the Gladius wouldn't even be picking you up on its sensors yet. It also had the maneuverability that they couldn't outmaneuver you. It had the Crusader acceleration, so they couldn't get away. So essentially, this ship went from being by design kind of a destroyer ship, something that was focused on taking down heavy ships like basically anything constellation sized or bigger. I'd say anything freelancer sized or bigger realistically, to being able to destroy everything in the game. It had no weakness. It was, even in the early days when they dropped it into the PTU, I took it out on 2 bounty hunting missions, and within 2 missions, I mean, I was laughing because it was a ton of fun to fly and shoot things, but it was so obviously overpowered that you would be an idiot to fly anything other than this ship. And so that's kind of what I'm going to get into right now, is why did CIG release the Ares Starfighter with all of those obvious advantages clearly overpowered into the game? And so was it just to make sales, or was it actually for another purpose? And I kind of wanted to get into ship balance in general on this one, as well as kind of CIG's thoughts on these ships, and both where I think that they're fine and where I think there's actually mining out here, and where I think they might need some work. And so with that in mind, let's go ahead and get to the details. Okay, so I'm going to start here. So this is the Ares. So right off the bat, a lot of people felt robbed after that sort of initial sale, because they felt that this was the sniper ship, and that its whole purpose was to be able to kill light fighters in a single shot, as well as take out capital ships. But I'll let you look at something right here: Crusader, Ares, capital ship, killer. This ship was never meant to be the one-shot light fighter hunter. That was a mistake. So at this point, I'm going to kind of get into the bad thing that CIG does. And it's bad in a very loose sense. So let me get into this. So when CIG drops a ship to us that's been in concept, it is, unless I'm mistaken here, more or less fresh out of the oven. So by the time they drop it into our hands, it's had almost no QA testing, other than the bare minimum. Do the components work? Will it turn off and on? That kind of thing. Most of the stuff just kind of plugs in now anyway. So the devs that are making the ships can basically make a ship that works without having QA go, okay, it doesn't turn on, the landing gear doesn't work, all this sort of stuff. They don't have to spend weeks in QA. So in that sense, CIG is relying on the community to figure out the balancing. And that's true not just on ship sales or ships in general, but the game as a whole. They kind of want us to go in and break things now, so that when they drop the game for real, they're kind of like, okay, that's kind of a problem, that's kind of a problem, that needs to be tweaked, that needs to be tweaked, and so on. That's kind of one of the reasons that they're releasing a lot of piracy things right now and not really cracking down on actual griefing, like blowing up people on pads and stuff like that. I mean, if you report it, they'll block those people, but other than that, it's minimal right now. They're kind of minimally involved in controlling what the community does, and that is intentional because they kind of want us to go in and figure things out, and then they'll make adjustments from there based on what we're doing, because we as a community of a few million people, and I'm not sure how many of those are actively engaging on a day-to-day, but a fair number are going to find exploits for this game that they've never even thought of. So going to the bad side of that. So on the good side, one of the reasons these ships aren't balanced when they first roll them out is because they haven't been anything since they first rolled out. We're the people that are getting our hands on it for the first time, flying it around and seeing it in action. And then CIG is looking at us when we take it out for the first time. In effect, we are the QA testers for these ships that come back and say, wow, fun ship to fly, but it is way overpowered. And that is exactly what the Ion was. The Inferno was kind of a joke for until this latest patch, when it's going to be the OP ship because it ignores shields essentially. And it's got a size 7 gun. But so on the good side, that's kind of the way that we get it. We get ships that are kind of overpowered initially because they haven't been tested. So we're testing them. We give them feedback either because we flat out say this ship is overpowered, or they just see the numbers and they see that everybody went from flying kind of a variety of ships to flying the Ares Ion, and that's it, because you'd be an idiot to fly anything else. When they saw those numbers, they're like, oh, okay, we need to tone this thing down. Now, on the bad side of that, CIG could easily release the ship as underpowered, like have terrible acceleration, awful handling, make the guns underpowered, all of that. They can make a ship that just sucks and then tweak it up so it's more powerful. They would not sell any of their ships then. This is a game that is funded by ships. So in that sense, are they making these ships overpowered just to sell ships? Yes and no. They're not making them intentionally super powered just to sell ships and then nerf them so that, you know, people are screwed and they bought something that they didn't want. That is not completely what's going on there. It's better for them to go a little bit heavy on the numbers at first and then tone it down. Just kind of, that's easier to fix from a dev standpoint than to gradually tweak it up and be like, okay, is it good? 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 Okay, now it's too good. Now we got to bring it down. It's easier to sort of start it at, this is the maximum effectiveness we think the ship should be. Let's see what the community does with it. And then if it's way overpowered, they're like, oh, okay, let's pull it down a little bit. How's it doing now? And they can kind of keep working it back. And that way they don't screw themselves on the ship sales, but they also don't screw themselves in the balance of the game. Now I'm going to talk about the balance of the game. And this one's going to be a lot shorter than my normal ones because I'm planning on ending it after this point. So hopefully I don't ramble on too long, right? So balance in the game is typically one of the last things you do in a game like this. So we don't have so many mechanics that you would balance these ships against. They got to go through and kind of balance them for what the game is right now, but that they don't want to spend a whole bunch of dev time on that because they've still got to implement armor. The flight model isn't completely in, and honestly, as a community, the community should be far more pissed off that what is effectively a flight simulator in its 10th year is just now zeroing in on the flight mechanics of the game. That is something the community should be upset about. But instead, they're upset that the Ion was nerfed or that the next ship is going to be nerfed. they're always going to be nerfing and buffing these ships until they kind of dial it in and get it right. Like the Inferno is supposed to have heavier armor than the Ion. We don't have armor in the game, so how do you balance those two ships against each other? Does the Ion need to be balanced against the Idris or against a Gladius? And they've kind of done a good job of setting up this rock, scissors, paper thing right now, where ships the size of the Ares size are vulnerable to light fighters. And light fighters are vulnerable to kind of the next class up if they're fully crewed, things like the Hammerhead, other light fighters. Light fighters won't have the punch to get through something like an Idris eventually. You won't be killing an Idris and an arrow when armor is implemented. It will, it's like attacking a battleship with a pistol. It's just going to bounce off. But that's the thing, is that right now, the balance that CIG is doing is minimal, and that's intentional because all of the mechanics aren't in. And once the mechanics are in, like armor and the flight model, and they have all of their guns and all the components and things are working the way that they're supposed to, when they start balancing the ships against each other and kind of zeroing in on that rock, scissors, paper game, that's when you knew this game is close, because it kind of means that those devs, they're just kind of working on all those mechanics, are kind of zooming back in. And this is kind of what I was doing in the talk link above about the about communication, that when CIG gets to the point that they're going through and they're smashing out bugs and they're working on total balance changes, that means that they've knocked out all of the precursors and all the stuff that they had to do before that in order to get to that point. And it means that they're happy with things the way they are, and they're like, okay, now we need to balance these things out. That will mean this game is getting real close, at least as far as these engines go. Obviously, we won't have 100 systems, and they're always going to be rolling out new ships, and they'll drop a new ship on us, and they'll kind of drop it in where they think it should be, and we'll take it and show that it's either way underpowered and no one will fly it or use it, or it'll be way overpowered and they'll be like, okay, we need to dial that down because everybody is using that, not just because it's the new sexy, but because it's way overpowered. And at that point, you'll know that the game is getting close to release. And that's really all that I wanted to say here. Like I said, this one's going to be a short one today. So let me know about your thoughts down there. If you think I'm way off base, if you think that CIG is just running a scam with the ships, so let me know down in the comments. I don't think they are. I think they do release the ships slightly more powerful than they need to sell the ships, but I think that they're not tested before they get to us. So CIG kind of tries to put them sort of in the ballpark of where it is, but while putting them in that ballpark, they go heavier rather than lighter. So they're going to lean into that ship a little bit harder than lean back and kind of put it in softly, because they do want to sell those ships. So in some extent, I think that's what's going on. I don't think that's what's all going on. Like, people are just kind of getting ridiculous now with this, that new ships are deliberately way overpowered and then they nerf them in the next patch. That's not what's happening, in my opinion. They're releasing these ships, people use them, they kind of show where the exploits are, they show where the ship is too strong or too weak, and then they kind of dial that in on the next patch. It's very, very rare that they fix those things in hot fixes. So you are waiting until the next patch. So really, if you want to have a new ship, I would recommend not flying it until the patch after it releases, because that's going to be more what the real ship is going to be. And that's kind of my 2 cents on the whole thing. Let me know what yours are. Like if you agree, don't like if you don't, and let me know down in the comments your thoughts if you think I'm right or wrong. That's all I got, gang. See me next time.